Welcome back to the Urban Elementz studio. You're all very welcome here. It's a little bit chilly today, and I've got myself all trimmed up just for you. Today we're going to be working on something a little bit simple, I suppose. I've been thinking back to some of the fun things that I used to do when I worked in a quilt shop, and one of the things we used to do during the summer, and it's certainly not summer now, it's chilly. During the kids camp, we would make a quilted bag for the kids camp. We would quilt some fabric and then they would turn it into a handled tote bag, and the kids would use that when they were going to do like a slumber party. One of the other things they would do, of course, would be to make pillowcases for their pillow. It'd be like overnight pillowcases in case they lost their matching pillowcase to their sheets. They would take this one specifically to sleepovers, just in case they lost it. But this pillow that we're going to make, this quilted pillow, is just for like a regular decorative pillow. And the size that I have today, I believe, is 22 inch. Yep, 20 inch. And the size of the pillow form, the envelope that we're going to make, is also 20 inch. I always thought in the past that you would make the pillow envelope bigger so that it would have a little bit of room once you got it in there. But I recently read that you want the pillow form to be the same size as the pillow, so it's really full once you get the pillow form inside. So what I'm going to do, it's going to be a very simple one today. I'm just going to be marking a diagonal grid on some batik fabric. I'm not sure which color I'm going to use today for the first one. And then I'm just going to layer the whatever batik I use with some batting and some beige fabric. The beige fabric will basically be on the inside of the pillow form. And then I'll use the whatever color I choose on the back of the pillow as well, and we'll go ahead and sew those together, and then we can just slip the pillow inside. But we will grid the fabric. I'll mark it first, and then we'll just go ahead and sew it on the sewing machine through the 3 layers, quilting it. And I'll use probably either the same color thread as the batik, or I might use a variegated, but I won't know that until I get there. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of get set up a little bit and cut my pieces and get ready for drawing the grid. Well, I have all the components for my quilting portion of this project. I have 2 layers of batting because this particular batting is a little bit thin, and I actually have 2 layers of the backing portion of the quilted portion. I'm only going to use one of those. I cut 2 because I plan on doing more than one pillow. And I also have the top layer of the front of the pillow. That's what I'm going to use for the design portion. I'm going to be marking on the blue batik, and so I'm going to go ahead and separate that off of both the backing and the batting. If I went ahead and tried to mark on here, it probably would mark okay, but if I get it back on the ironing board by itself, I think I'll get a more precise marking. So I'll go ahead and get those layered off. And generally speaking, if you want to get a really precise marking, what you can do is take regular household freezer paper and iron a sheet of the freezer paper onto the back side of your fabric that you're going to be using. A lot of times people will do this if they're using a Pigma pen for doing signature blocks, because the Pigma pen will really drag on the fabric and you can get little stutters in your writing, especially if you're doing cursive. It's a little bit easier with small printed writing. But if you're doing cursive, sometimes the pen tip will pull the fabric and you get little stutters in your cursive. So if you iron on the back side, freezer paper, the little plastic portion of the freezer paper will stick to the fabric, and it helps keep the fabric smooth as you're writing. And then the paper will just peel off. And in the same way, if we put that on the back of this fabric, it would help stabilize the fabric as we are marking. But I don't think that's going to be necessary with the type of implement that I'm going to be using today. Now, I say the back of the fabric. Batik really doesn't have a back. Every once in a while you might find a batik that is slightly different in the backing, but this particular one really doesn't read that different from one side to the other, so I'm not going to worry about it at all. I'm just going to iron it again so that I get nice marks. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a simple grid on here. Now, the most common thing that I would do is use the 45-degree marking on the ruler, and that would give you a square grid on point. And I've done that many times when I've done quilting. But today I'm going to use the 60 degrees line on the 30 degree. The 30 degree line on the ruler, and most rulers that have these markings have a 30, 45, and a 60. The 30 degree line will give us diamonds instead of squares. So that's a little bit less common, and I think it'll make it a little bit more unusual. Once I get the first 30 degree mark in one direction, then I can just use the ruler and measure out 1-inch increments from there in both directions, and then I can go ahead and do the alternate side, perpendicular side of the 30 degree and get 1-inch increments going in that direction too. Once I get those markings done, then I can go ahead and layer my sandwich and take this over to the quilting or sewing machine. And again, I'm going to be using a domestic sewing machine for this little project. I'm going to go ahead and I'm using Best Press, but I'm going to go ahead and get the fabric a little bit wet, and I'm going to go ahead and iron the fabric again. I have a nice fold here that I want to get rid of, but also I'm going to go ahead and iron my fabric again, because when I iron the fabric after it's this wet, the fabric is going to kind of adhere a little bit to the ironing board, and that'll just give me a little bit of insurance while I'm making my marking lines. Not a ton, but a little. And I'll just keep ironing this until I don't really see any steam coming off. The other nice thing about this is that I get to smell my fresh linen scent, which I don't really mind too much. Either that or linen, those are my favorite. Or lavender, rather. I've grown lavender out in my yard, but it always overtakes the sidewalk because the lavender really likes the heat, being that it's a Mediterranean plant. So when I plant it next to the sidewalk, it leans over to the sidewalk because it really wants to bake in the sun. So it will go right over top of that sidewalk, and before I know it, I don't have any sidewalk left. So I think that's pretty good. I don't see too much steam coming off of here. And I'm going to set my iron aside, and I'm going to get my ruler out. And as I said, I'm going to line up one of my 30 degree lines with the edge of one of the pieces of fabric. And all I really have to do is make one good mark somewhere, and then I can go ahead and use the 1-inch line on the ruler to be making marks from that one line, and I'll do it all the way across the piece, the square, and then I can go ahead and go to a perpendicular line and do it again on the other side. What I'm going to be using to mark today is Miracle Chalk from Urban Elements, And it comes in multiple formats. It comes in a powder that you could put into one of these quick swipe boxes. And this is what you would use if you were using a stencil type product for marking stencil for hand or machine quilting. They also come in these pencil type products that you could sharpen and make markings with. And this is more like a tailor's marking piece. And this is the one that I'm going to use today. This has 3 different pieces in the package. And with this particular one, you could either rub it on the side of a piece of sandpaper or just use a knife when you need to sharpen it again. The nice thing about it is you can clearly see the marking on there. It will not rub off. Even if you got it wet, it's not going to come off. The way that this comes off is by the heat of the iron. And so you would never have to worry about it coming back because it's the heat of the iron that gets rid of it. But it does leave a nice marking on there, and it's not going to go away while you're using it for quilting. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to make one mark. I'm going to line up my 30-degree line right on the edge of one of the pieces. Doesn't matter which of the 4 sides I did. And I'm just going to go ahead and make my mark. And then from then on out in this direction, I'm just going to go ahead and lay my ruler on that line that I previously drawn, and I'll just keep making this mark until I get the entire piece done. And I'm going to go ahead and finish this. One thing I will tell you though, when I was finishing a quilt that I had hand appliqued, I had used one of the water soluble pens, and it was during the summer and it was very humid, and by the time I got I had done all the quilt marking off the frame. By the time I got the quilt loaded on the frame, the humidity had erased all of the marking that I had done. So I had to go ahead and mark it again while it was on the frame, and it was nowhere near as accurate as I had been once I had it off the frame. So I was a little bit miffed about that. So this is a very nice product. You can see I have all of my lines all going in this direction, and I've made a mark here. I have my 30-degree mark on this side again. My ruler's going perpendicular to the lines I've already created, and I've already made one mark, but I'm going to go ahead and extend it all the way. And now I'm going to go ahead and make 1-inch increments, the lines going all the way across, just like we did in the other direction. And you'll see that we're going to get diamonds instead of squares. And once I get that done, we can go ahead and make this sandwich, and we can get to the quilting process. Now you can see that I've gone in both directions. You can see my little diamond print is emerging. At this point, you can see that the size is pretty small. These are obviously 1-inch diamonds, but you could make these larger by going to the 2-inch instead, not doing every single line, doing every other one. But you could also have some fun by switching up the threads, maybe doing every other one in one color and then coming back and doing every other one in another color. Another thing to note is the harder you press with the chalk, the easier it is to see the line. But also, and I did that in some places for you, but also if you're in person, you can still see the line pretty easily even if it isn't that dark. But the harder you press, the more you're going to use your chalk, the quicker you're going to go through it. Another thing is, as you're double checking, you want to make sure you keep your ruler straight, and another way to double check that is to make sure that your ruler is lining up on the line, but you could check it on the other side as well, that it's lining up on the lines on the back side, so you can kind of double check as you're going. But I have all of the lines on my fabric that I'm going to use, and this will be the top. Once I get all this quilted, I can just go ahead and iron the whole piece, and all of the markings will disappear. I think I'm going to go process the information about maybe using different thread colors as I go, maybe every other one, and get some different quilting designs. But you could even do like almost mountains with this design, or zigzags, or anything you wanted. Even though it's a very simple diamond pattern, you could actually do diamonds, individual diamonds, if you wanted to, and get very artsy with the changing of the thread colors. But I'm not going to get crazy with it because this is just a simple project that I wanted to do. Well, I'm back at it. We have all of the lines on the front of our pillow form that we're going to be doing. And so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step. I have all of the pieces cut to size that I'm going to be using. And so what I'm going to do is lay down the back side of the inside of the pillow. This is what's going to be on the back side of the batting. No one's going to see this unless they're maybe washing the pillow casing. They might see it then. This is just going to hold the batting and help it stay in place while we're doing some quilting. And if you're ever going to use 505 when you're doing some quilting, a lot of times I will myself even just spray the batting. But if you want to get a little bit better hold, you're going to get more adhesion if you spray the fabric itself, because there's more, it's almost like threads to the inch. There's more to grip there. I have two different pieces of batting here because I wanted this to really stand out. So I'm just doing a little layer of 505 in between. 505 is a temporary spray adhesive. I don't know who, Odif is the name of the company. The idea of it, originally, how I was introduced to it was for machine embroidery. So you would put the 505 on the back of the fabric, and you would put some kind of a stabilizer on the back of your fabric also, and you would then put the fabric in your hoop, and you would use that to do machine embroidery. That is how I believe 505 really came into its prime, but it's also very useful in a lot of other projects. It's called temporary spray adhesive because it will evaporate over a period of time. How much time? It really depends on your atmospheric conditions and stuff. Sometimes it'll evaporate really quickly, so you'd want to get to your project the same day, but sometimes it may be there several weeks later. I don't know if it has to do with humidity, temperature, or what, but it is very good for a lot of things. I use it on my long arm when I need to put the top on the batting or at the bottom, or if I have some ruffles on the edges of the bottom and I want to ease those out, I will spray the 505, and then I can go ahead and smooth that down. It's kind of like having a bunch of extra little fingers to get the grip on all of that. Even after you've done the starch trick where you've starched it and let it sit overnight, and so it tightens it up, you can still use the 505 on the batting and help get that fabric to attach to the batting and tap it down, and then you can go and base the edges. Just kind of a nice way to get it connected. So now I've got these three pieces basically connected together, and now I'm going to go ahead and spray base the back. As I was saying, this basically will evaporate, so it's not going to leave any residue. I can see it a little bit better here, the white on the blue. This is one of those times where you wish you kind of had a quilting buddy. So now I have my quilt sandwich, and my quilt sandwich is a little bit bigger than what I need it to be. So when I go over to the sewing machine, what I could do, just to save myself a little bit of headache, is just do some basting stitch around all 4 sides if I wanted to. I'm not sure I'm going to do that or not. If I was worried about it not getting it all done in one day. The downside of that is that if you're as you're sewing, you may get a little ripples in the fabric, like the top, that you may want to have a place for it to ease out, and if it's not stitched on both sides, that would help. So if you just did 2 sides and you were stitching, then the opposite 2 sides would be able to ease out that fabric. You just have to remember to always start on the 2 sides that you had stitched the edges on. So I still haven't picked out my thread, so I still have to do that and load that into the Bernina. But all I'm going to be doing is basically straight stitching, and so this will be a little bit monotonous after a while, so I'm not going to make you watch the entire bit of it. But I will do some, and I'll probably start in one of the middle rows and work my way out in both directions. And you know, really there's just a lot of different ways you could work this with the color. I could do all of these rows in one color and all of these in a different color. I could do every other row in one color, and then do the same on this, and then switch my thread color and come back and do every other thread in another color. There's a lot of different things you could do. It all depends on how many times you want to change thread and how many times you want to pay attention to alternating the thread color, and if you made a mistake, would you beat yourself up? I would never beat myself up, not under the conditions that we live in today. This whole exercise is joy. It's an exercise in meditation. It's an exercise in seeking joy, and if it goes one way that I didn't expect, that's totally fine. That may be where I was meant to go that day. I have to let it be what it is and not force it. So I'm going to go ahead and get my thread, and I'm going to get on the machine, and we're going to stitch some stitches. Well, I think I'm ready. I didn't do any stitching around the 4 sides because I think my layers are pretty well stuck together. I just fused them. I'm going to start somewhere approximately in the middle of the block. Because I did a 30-degree angle instead of a 60-degree, it's not going to go corner to corner. So I'm just going to choose one of the lines, and I'm going to start. The colors I chose a yellow, which is variegated. It's an isocord, and it's a 40 weight. And I chose blue, that is also an isocord, 40 weight. The blue color is 9605. The cap's covering the yellow one, so I can't see it at the moment. And I'm just going to go. My stitch length right now is at 2.25, which I think is okay. I might go up just a little bit more. At the very beginning, it was way too tight, but because it's in the middle, I think it'll get lost a little bit. And some of this I can trim off because, as I said, I made my shape a little bit too big. It's at least 2 inches too big in the blue fabric, and so I can trim some of that off, some of it. Instead of cutting the fabric or the thread each time, I'm just going to sew right on the edge and then come back and do the next one. And I am going to do every other row in the yellow, and then I'll come back and do every other row in the blue. So there'll just be a lot more of this. I'll get a bunch of stitches done, and before I start the blue, I'll show you what it looks like. Do you remember a commercial with the Tootsie Roll Pop where a kid brings the Tootsie Roll to the owl and he asks him how many licks does it take to get to the center, and the owl licks 1, 2, 3 and then crunch, and he says 4. Well, that's how many rows it took me before I made a mistake. I did 1, 2, 3, and then 4, and then I did right next to each other. But I just kept going because I don't think when I'm finished you'll be able to tell. So I have all my yellows going in both directions. Now I'm going to go ahead and change the thread, and I'm going to do my blues, and then I'm going to get the iron and just iron all of this white away, and all we'll have left is the quilting pattern. It probably shows a little bit better on this side, but this is going to be the inside of the pillow. From the back, you can see that I got all of my strips done, all my rows done in each of the directions. And from the front, it's funny because you almost can't see the blue lines at all, but you can see the chalk lines still on there. And all I have to do is iron those chalk lines away. And that'll be pretty much the end of it. This afternoon I went to see my mother. She's in the ICU at the moment. It's funny because when I went to the receptionist desk, they said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yes, I'd like to see my mommy." And the woman just looked at me. When my brothers started having kids, all of the grandkids started calling my mother Mams. Mams. So I started calling her Mamsie Bug, or Mamsie Pajami, Mammy Pajami. So I went to see Mammy Pajami today. I'm really overdoing it because the marking is all gone already. Right now I'm really just flattening out my piece. But actually looks pretty good, doesn't it? Even with some of my lines weren't perfect. Ooh, I got a little bit of a curve there. And one of the lines, I had two blues together, but I don't think I could find it quickly now. So that is that's what this is going to look like here. And I know that this is a very simplistic pattern. You know, there are a lot of different ways to do this type of pattern, but the idea was that you could use this marking for this type of work. You could do all kinds of geometric designs with the this miracle chalk, and you'd get really good results. It stays in place until you iron it off, which is great. It's not going to evaporate with humidity or moisture. So even if you have it sitting for a long time and not working on it, it's still going to be there. So the next thing I'm going to do is trim this down to an exact size, the same size for the pillow. It's a 20-inch pillow, so I'm going to do a 20.5-inch square, but I also need to cut two 20.5-inch squares of the exact same color of this blue batik for the backing. So I'm just going to layer 3 pieces together, the 2 pieces of this blue batik and this quilted piece, and I'm going to cut it all at once, 20.5-inch square. So I have my quilted square, and I've already trimmed up 2 of the sides, so I'm going to bring you in so I can show you. I'm just going to be trimming up the other 2 sides to my finished sides that I need. So I've trimmed up these 2 edges here. So first I'm going to bring this edge over to my edge of the mark. It's my 0 mark, and I'm cutting this to be a 20.5-inch square, so it finishes approximately at 20 inches after my seam allowance. So I'm just going to make sure that we have the bottom edge on the straight line of the mat, and we're not piecing here, so if it's not exactly precise, I'm not going to really be that upset. I don't think the pillow is going to show too much. Normally I wouldn't be cutting up here, but that's the best situation that I have for today. So, okay, I have the front of my pillow. This is the back or the inside of the front of the pillow. And then I've got 2 pieces of fabric that are exactly the same size as the front. And if I can get them apart. So I have 2 pieces of that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to, in my case it doesn't matter because they're the same on both sides. But I'm going to put the fabric right sides together on here. I want to have one and sew it here, and then I'm going to put the other one on and sew it on this side. But I'm going to do them one at a time. So you could either pin or clip and sew these one at a time. I probably would just stick pins because I have those ready. Okay, I have my quilted top facing up, my right sides of my fabric facing down. I have pins in one edge, so I'm just going to do a 1/4 inch seam on this one side and remove my pins as I go over. I'm going to put them in my shirt pocket pin holder. So now I can go back to the table and get my second piece ready to put on. This is the piece that we just put on. I'm just going to go ahead and push that one out of the way. I don't need to press it. And I'm going to lay the second piece on this edge. And I'm going to put my pins in place. I'm going to pull them out of my shirt pocket pin cushion. I don't know if you knew it, but that's one of the benefits of a flannel shirt with a pocket on it. I went to visit my mom in the hospital today. She said to make sure to tell everybody hello. She's in good mood, so that's good. So now I have the opposite side that I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch from the edge, and I'm going to remove my pins as I go. I'm going to put my pins in my pocket. Okay, you see that I have my piece of fabric, one on each side, one on the left and one on the right. Again, these are the same size as the front of the pillow, and both of these pieces are going to be the backing. So I'm going to take one of them, doesn't matter which one, and I'm going to fold it back on itself. Want to get it nice and smooth. I've just folded it back on top of itself. Now I'm going to take the second one and I'm just going to lay it back the way it was when we originally sewed it in place. So now what we're going to do is put a seam straight up here and up here, but we're not going to sew this edge. I'm going to leave that one open. So I'm going to take that over to the machine and do 2 seams, one on each side, but I'm not seaming this piece. Okay, I have 2 seams to do. So far, so good. That's it for my sewing. So now all I have to do is I'm going to trim the corners a little tiny bit, and then I can turn the pillowcase inside out, but I'll show you how I do that. Because my seam allowance were pretty small, I won't have a lot of bulk, but I did quilt this, so there is a little bit there. So I want to trim off just on the corners as much of this corner as I can without getting into the seam allowance at all. So I'm just going to take a nip there on each of the 2 corners at this side. And I'll go ahead and do some off of this one as well, because we have a couple different layers there. And then remember, we don't have a seam here, so I could reach in and turn my pillow inside out. Now you could iron this if you wanted to, but the pillow is going to help fluff it out. And you can go ahead and get something. Different people use different things to help push out the corner. You just don't want to use anything that's going to poke through it too hard. I'm going to see how this works. I'm going to try the bottom of this pin. I just don't want it to poke through. I'm really trying to push more up on the quilted side than on the plain fabric side. And I think that's good enough for me. So now all I have to do is get my pillow and stuff it. So now all I'm going to do is put my pillow inside. So now I'm just going to go ahead and pull that tab piece to the back. And I have a nice pillow that I could hug on those nights when I'm alone. So basically that's it for the pillow. Of course, as I said earlier, you don't necessarily need to mark out diamond pattern. Maybe you have a guide on your machine that could have let you do this. But my point was to show you a marking implement that would stay in place on human days without getting brushed away or other things that happen in the quilting studio. So I really like the way that this one works, and you could use it on a lot of different geometric shapes. I did use the Tailor chalk type style of it today, but it also comes in a swipe and in a pencil stick style, or like a crayon style. So that's it for me for today. I think this is going to be good. My mom's supposed to go into rehab next week, so I think I might take this pillow to her in rehab so she has something from home, something from me, because she gets lonely without me. So that's it. Next time I will show you a couple other things we can do with the chalk. Working with stencils, working with free motion quilting, and I need to get caught up because I'm way behind, you can imagine. So thanks for stopping in the studio and spending some time with me. Remember, you're all welcome here. Thanks for coming in. It was good spending time with you. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other.